So we're skipping forward just a smidge this week to number 58 in my series of video game movie reviews, with an adaptation brought to us by one of the most infamous video game movie directors around. Nope, not that one. We're all done with you, Bull. You got no more. Please, no more. Monster Hunter is brought to us by director Paul W.S. Anderson and stars Milla Jovovich and Tony Jaa. When a group of military rangers headed up by Jovovich out in the desert get stuck in a weird electrical storm, they find themselves transported to another world with gigantic monsters. And now it's up to them to figure out how to survive in this weird new world with all these crazy monsters and find their way home. Monster Hunter is based on the extremely popular long-running video game series. Now I gotta admit, this is one that I haven't really played. I'm not that knowledgeable about the Monster Hunter series. The extent of my Monster Hunter knowledge is pretty pedestrian. The most I've played of any of them was about 10 or 20 minutes of the beginning of the more recently released Monster Hunter World. And my understanding is that that one is a bit of a departure from what the series has been over the years. Either way, I don't really know much about this series. I know what some of the monsters look like just because I've seen them here or there throughout the years, but I don't really know much more than that. So going into this movie, I am viewing it as just that, a movie. I am aware that it's based on a video game, and some of the stuff like the monsters and like the big ass swords and a couple of things like that looks somewhat familiar, but beyond that, I don't really relate this to the game or anything else. This is just a movie as far as I'm concerned. And that's how I'm going to look at it, is just the movie for what it is. So don't get mad at me if I say I like something in this movie and it's kind of a departure from the game series. I just don't fucking know. I have no idea. The story of Monster Hunter, the movie at least, is nothing we haven't really seen before. We got some people from our world that are suddenly transported to another world where everything's different and they know nothing. Now I do know that this is a departure from the games. As far as I understand, the games take place solely in this other world where all these monsters exist. There's no like military from this world or anything from this world within that game series as far as I know. And I do know that that has been a bit of a point of contention for some of the people that I've heard talking about this movie online. The fact that they included the US military in this movie. And I get why they did it. You have these characters that know nothing about this world, so the other characters from that world have to explain things to them, and by proxy, they're explaining stuff to us, the viewer. It's kind of an age-old, albeit cheap way of going about it, and yes, there are better ways of doing it, but as far as that purpose, it does its job. And really, the whole military aspect isn't really that big a part of the movie. It does show up in the beginning just a bit and then in the end, but as a whole, this movie does take place for the vast majority of the time in this other world with the monsters. The military side of things doesn't really come in that much. Now, the outsider coming in and having to learn about the world, that's a big part of it all. So if that's not a part of the games, which I don't think it is, and that offends you in some way, you're probably not gonna like this. That's how they decided to go about telling us, the viewers, about this world, and you know, that just is what it is. Now, once they're thrust into this world, things escalate fairly quickly. This giant bull dragon with no wings monster thing comes out of the sand and starts attacking them, and they have to run to a set of rocks for refuge. So of course, the whole time, this thing's like under the sand, like a shark going around this area trying to get to them, waiting for them to come off this rocky area so it can get them, which I don't really get because it can come out of the sand and walk around, so I don't know why it didn't just fucking go up there and get them, but whatever, semantics, I guess. Either way, once they're up on the rocks, they're not really in the clear. They encounter some other monsters and some other things happen. Then they encounter Tony Jaa, who is a part of this world, and he ends up being our way of understanding this world, even though he speaks a language that us nor the characters in the movie can understand. But we do end up getting some information from him, and I will say that that is something the movie did pretty good. Even though these two characters never really speak the same language, we do get what he's trying to say throughout. Now, this was the part of the movie that worked really well for me. Jovovich and Jaa just had really good chemistry together, especially for two characters that don't really ever conventionally talk. I really enjoyed their interactions. They went together together really well. It was a good time seeing these two go back and forth. And really, that's a big part of this movie. The vast majority of the runtime is devoted to Jovovich and Ja trying to work together to get off of this little rocky area and past this big bull monster dragon with no wings thing. I think they said it's called Diabolos or something like that, and I've heard the name before. I know that's one of the popular monsters in the Monster Hunter series, so, you know, just don't give me too hard of a time. I'm just not that familiar with the property, sorry. It looked really familiar though, and as far as I could tell, it looks like the one in the game, so at least be happy for that if you're a fan of this series. They did the monsters right as far as I can tell. So like I said, the majority of the movie is these two trying to connect and understand each other, come together and somehow work to defeat this giant Diabolos monster or whatever it's called, and also fiend off these smaller, much more nasty, by the way, creatures that are on the rocky area. And yes, color me surprised, they actually do some monster hunting here. I guess I shouldn't have been that surprised. The name of the fucking movie is Monster Hunter, but you know, it just was one of those things. I didn't think they were actually going to be hunting any monsters. I thought it was just kind of like a name of the series and there wouldn't be any hunting. But hey, what do you know? They actually hunt some. And there's even a good reason given for hunting some of these monsters too. So hey, look at that. Continuity for the win. Now once we get beyond this part to the final third of the film, we do meet some new characters. And these characters are nowhere near as fleshed out as Ja and Jovovich. Now this final third of the movie is entertaining, but it's not as interesting as everything that came before it. I surprisingly was really feeling this movie for the first 2/3 of it. I really enjoyed the time that they had where we were learning about the world and these characters are trying to get to know each other and figure out this problem they had. And it doesn't like totally fall off the map in that final third or anything, but it just kind of loses some of those interesting aspects. And it also seems that things are just like kicked into high gear out of nowhere. Like the movie had a nice pace. We were getting to know things about the world and these people, and I was really feeling it. And then all of a sudden we meet all these new characters and things just take off out of nowhere. And then next thing you know, the movie's just over. I like the stuff that was happening as this movie ended, but that's the problem. It was as this movie ended. It ended on total sequel bait and left us just kind of with credits, and that's it. This movie could have really gone for another 20 minutes of screen time. I mean, I want to see what was going to happen there at the end. I want to know more about all these characters we just met. We're given just like the smallest little morsels of what these people are about, and then it's just over. And we're like, wait, you know, some of that stuff actually sounded like it could be interesting. Can I get some more? Oh, I mean, I guess not. There's the credits. As a whole, I did enjoy the story and execution for what it was in this movie. I was entertained. I was having a good time, but I really wish it just hadn't ended there. I wish we had just a bit more. And I know you always want to leave your audience wanting more, but you didn't really just leave us with wanting more. You left us without an ending and gave us absolute total sequel bait. And that really kind of sucks because I was really digging this movie until that happened. Now, performance-wise, it's mainly Milla Jovovich and Tony Jaa. There are some other people in the movie, but as I said, the vast majority of the time is these two trying to figure things out, trying to communicate. And I do think that these two did a really good job with that. I mean, this isn't like Schindler's List or anything, but I did really enjoy the time of these two characters together trying to figure out how to defeat this gigantic monster. Both Jaa and Jovovich show a natural charisma and had great chemistry together. And watching them together in these scenes was a really entertaining time. Now, the performances in the rest of the movie are fine. There's nothing really bad about them, but the vast majority of them are fairly throwaway. The only two characters we really get much development with would be Jovovich and Jaa. Everybody else clearly plays second fiddle. Now, as I said, the characters we meet in the end seem like they could be some interesting characters with some really neat backstories. But from a performance standpoint, there's not really a lot here. And that's not really the performer's fault. They just don't have much to work for, nor do they have much time to work with. Ron Perlman shows up for a little bit with this crazy Cloud from Final Fantasy VII cosplay hair going on. And while he does give us the majority of those little morsels of exposition that I said seemed really interesting, beyond that and this kind of cool move he does with the sword a couple of times, there's not really a lot to the character nor the performance. Once again, I don't blame him so much as the fact that he didn't have much to work with nor the time to work with it. That hair too, I mean, the actual hair prosthetic or whatever it is doesn't necessarily look bad, but on him, it just looks really fucking off. It's real hard to take him serious in the couple of scenes he was in with that hair. I just had a really hard time with it. The performances as a whole are pretty good here, with the standouts definitely being Ja and Jovovich. Now, one area that this movie definitely shines would be its technical prowess. The movie looks really good, but that's not really a surprise. I mean, say what you will about Paul W.S. Anderson and his storytelling techniques, the guy knows how to shoot a movie. His movies, for the most part, look good. However, in the past, we have seen some inconsistencies with CGI in his film. Thankfully, here with Monster Hunter, the CGI is really well done. With the exception of one scene of two characters hanging off of a cliff for a second that was clearly a blue screen and did kind of stick out just a bit, this movie has some really good special effects. Now, there's a whole bunch of CGI going on here, which is understandable because it's a movie that deals with gigantic foreign monsters. But the CGI here all looks really good. The movie's action scenes are also shot really well. They're very exciting. Now, it does help that the two main characters actually have a bond and we do care about them a bit, so when they're put in these situations, that makes it all the better and more exciting. But the way that these action scenes are shot, even if you didn't give a shit about any of the characters, they are still shot really well. They're very exciting scenes. So even if you give no shits about the story here and just can't stand it, the movie is an exciting ride. Guys, I actually really enjoyed Monster Hunter. Leading up to its release, people have really been talking a whole lot of shit about it for a whole bunch of different reasons. I've heard about how the trailer and some of the stuff in it didn't look like it was very faithful to the game series, and about how Paul W.S. Anderson was directing it, and a lot of people didn't really care for the way he handled the Resident Evil franchise. And while me myself, I am a fan of the Resident Evil franchise, I do recognize that that series does have its faults. And I can say that Monster Hunter is a better made movie than the Resident Evil movies. As far as how faithful this movie is to the games or not, I can't really comment there. I can only say that some of the stuff in this movie did look familiar to me. I've seen it before from the games and the stuff I've seen in the games over the years. Whether it stays faithful to the mythos and all the other stuff going on in the games, I just have no idea. I don't know. But I can say that this movie had two interesting leads, some really great special effects, and an interesting story, although it did end a bit abruptly and I wanted a bit more. And while I do feel like that was this movie's biggest downfall, that it kind of robbed us of an actual ending to the movie, even with that, it was an entertaining ride. And because of that, I'll say that Monster Hunter is absolutely worth a rent.
All he wanted was, hey! This.
I have to return some videotape.
This wasn't the greatest movie ever made or anything. It wasn't even the greatest video game movie ever made. Though it is better than a lot of other video game movies, that's for damn sure. But what it was entertaining, and that's what movies are supposed to be, is entertaining. I had a really good time with this movie, and I don't regret going to see it at all. So all the stuff about whether it is or is not faithful to the video game series aside, if you like entertaining popcorn big-ass monster movies, then check out Monster Hunter one night, and I think you'll have a good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of Monster Hunter. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. What's the name of the world in Monster Hunter? Alright, I'm gonna try this. And as always, stay sexy, Shrod. So this movie's had a bit of controversy recently because when it released in China before here in the States, apparently there's a part in the movie where a character says something that a lot of people over there found really offensive. They've even been calling it racist, I guess. And from what I understand, it was kind of a throwaway thing, but they went ahead and just removed this line from the movie. Now, supposedly, not only did they remove it from the prints that are playing in China, but they removed it from all versions of the movie globally. Now, I looked it up and it said it was a line where a character was making a joke where they say something about Chinese knees. Actually, I think he just says Chinese and he's talking about his knees and he's Asian. Either way, what I read online is that it was taken out of all versions. However, when I went and saw this movie last night at a local theater, there was a line in the beginning of the movie that was fairly throwaway that an Asian character did say as a joke to another character, "What kind of knees do I have?" And they said, "What kind?" And he says, "Chinese." So I don't know if like this was like an older print or if that's not the line or if they didn't really cut it out globally or what. But two things. First of all, did I see like a version that nobody was supposed to see somehow? And if so, how did this major theater chain get that version? And second, I get that it was the translation, apparently, that really made this bad and is why people were all up in arms and calling it racist. And while the joke isn't really that funny in the movie, and it is just that pretty throwaway, and you lose or gain nothing from it being or not being there, I didn't really see how it was that offensive. However, once again, there's the whole translation thing. Maybe it was translated and just says something totally different for all I know. But the way that I took it in the movie I saw last night, unless that's like a redubbed line or something to replace the actual offensive line, the line that's there about Chinese it's nothing. It's just kind of stupid. Like I said, it's not really a funny joke. It's just pretty much throwaway. You gain nothing from it being there or not being there. Once again, I don't know what the translation was or what it means in that culture, but I don't know. I just don't get it. Or maybe I'm just like really fucking insensitive. I don't know. Yeah, it's probably that. If that's the case, sorry I brought it up. I wasn't trying to offend anybody. Just kind of talking about a situation with the movie that I just reviewed. Sorry. All this talking, and that's probably not even the fucking line.